On the bed, his tiny chest heaving with hot, shallow breaths, his face flushed and chapped lips muttering incoherently. A tidal wave of fear washed over Eleanor. She frantically wiped Leo's forehead, armpits, and groin with a warm cloth, but his fever remained stubbornly high. Suddenly, Leo began to convulse, his eyes rolling back. "Leo, don't scare Mommy, please," Eleanor cried, her voice cracking. Basic first aid flashed through her mind. Turn him on his side to prevent choking, but her hands shook uncontrollably. They needed a hospital now. She snatched her phone from the nightstand, her finger tracing Daniel's name. The phone rang long and insistent. Once, twice, 3 times, no answer. Outside, lightning ripped across the sky, followed by deafening thunder that rattled the windows of their spacious, cold master bedroom in the Palisades estates. Leo jolted, a weak cry escaping his swollen throat. Eleanor bit her lip until she tasted blood and called again. This time, Daniel finally answered, his voice gruff, impatient, and laced with irritation. "Hello? Do you have any idea what time it is? Why do you keep calling?" Eleanor choked back a sob, her voice fragmented. "Daniel, please come home. Leo's fever is over 104. He's having seizures. I'm so scared. Please come take him to the hospital with me." A moment of silence, then a frustrated sigh. "A fever again. He just had one last month. What kind of mother are you? Always letting him get sick. I'm in a crucial meeting with international partners. I can't just leave. Call the pediatrician or get an Uber. But the storm is so bad. The doctor's after hours line is busy." The car. Eleanor's explanation was cut short as other sounds filtered through the phone. It wasn't the rustle of papers or the tense discussions of a multi-million-dollar business meeting. It was the clinking of glasses, soft jazz music, and unmistakably the sweet cooing voice of a woman. "Daniel, hurry over and blow out the candles. Everyone's waiting for you." Eleanor recognized that voice instantly. Chloe Miller, Daniel's new executive assistant, hired 6 months ago. She always presented herself as innocent and fragile, bowing politely and calling Eleanor Mrs. Hayes whenever they met. Daniel seemed to have forgotten he hadn't hung up, or perhaps he simply didn't care if Eleanor heard. His voice returned, devoid of irritation, replaced by a strange tenderness. "All right, I'm coming. Right now, sweetheart. Happy birthday. Happy birthday." The words pierced Eleanor's eardrums, tore through her heart, and shattered the last vestiges of her fragile trust. Today was October 20th. She remembered now it was Chloe Miller's birthday, so his crucial meeting and international partners were just a cover to openly celebrate with his mistress. While his son fought for his life, he was happily blowing out candles for another woman. "Daniel, you." Eleanor screamed into the phone, but only the cold, impersonal sound of a dial tone answered her. He had hung up. Her phone slipped from her grasp, falling silently onto the thick carpet. She had no time for heartbreak or reproach. Leo was drifting into unconsciousness in her arms. Eleanor sprang up, grabbing a thick coat and wrapping it around her son. She scooped him up and rushed out of the master bedroom. The 10000 QFT mansion was eerily silent. The housekeeper was on leave and the groundskeeper was in the guest house out back. In this storm, calling them would take too long. She ran down to the garage, intending to drive herself. But as the garage door rumbled open, she was met with an empty space. The 2 luxury cars that usually sat there, a black Maybach and a red Porsche, were gone. Eleanor froze. The Maybach was Daniel's daily driver, and the Porsche was in her name, but the spare keys were always kept in the shoe cabinet. She remembered now. This afternoon, Daniel had claimed his car was still at the shop and borrowed hers to take clients on a tour. He had taken her car to drive his mistress to a birthday party. He had even taken Frank, the family's private chauffeur, leaving her and her child stranded on this stormy night. No car, no driver. Eleanor clutched Leo tightly and plunged into the blinding rain. The main gate of the estate was nearly a quarter of a mile from the main road. The wind lashed at her face, and the cold rain soaked her thin pajamas in seconds. Eleanor slipped, her knee hitting the sharp cobblestones hard. The excruciating pain shot up to her brain, fresh blood mingling with rainwater, but she didn't dare let go. She held Leo tight, shielding him from the heavy raindrops with her body. Eleanor struggled to her feet and kept running. Her bare feet, already bloody from the gravel, felt no pain beyond the suffocating fear of losing her son. When she reached the main road, it was deserted. The few taxis that sped by were either occupied or refused to stop in the severe weather. Her ride-sharing app kept searching for drivers in vain. Eleanor stood under a dilapidated bus stop, tears mixing with rainwater streaming down her cheeks. She looked at Leo's pale face, overwhelmed by a sense of helplessness. The Aries of Vance Industries, the wife of CEO Daniel Hayes, Yet at this moment, she was as pathetic as a beggar, unable to find transportation to save her child. Just as she was about to desperately rush into the street to flag down a car, a truck slowed down. The middle-aged driver poked his head out. "Ma'am, what are you doing out here in this rain?" Eleanor lunged forward like a drowning person, grabbing a lifeline, pounding on the window. "Sir, please save my son. He has a high fever and is having seizures. I need to get to the hospital urgently. Please, I'll pay you anything." The driver saw the pale child in her arms and nodded without hesitation. "Get in quick. Don't worry about money now." The old truck roared to life, tearing through the curtain of rain toward Metropolitan General Hospital. Inside the cabin, reeking of engine oil, Eleanor held Leo tightly, trembling uncontrollably from cold and fear. In her mind, Daniel's smiling face by the birthday candles flickered, interwoven with Leo's ragged breaths. A seed of hatred, watered by the cold rain and brutal betrayal, began to sprout in the heart that had once loved him so completely. Metropolitan General Hospital was brightly lit, a stark contrast to the darkness and storm outside. The pungent smell of disinfectant made Eleanor dizzy. She rushed into the emergency room with Leo, her wet hair plastered to her face, water dripping onto the polished floor. "Doctor, where's a doctor? Please save my son." Her desperate cries attracted the attention of all the on-duty medical staff. A nurse quickly pushed a gurney over. The doctor on duty quickly assessed Leo's condition, his face immediately grave. The emergency room doors slammed shut in front of Eleanor, separating her from her precious child. The red surgery light illuminated, blinding and painful. A middle-aged nurse emerged, handing Eleanor a stack of papers, her voice reproachful. "Why did you wait until his fever was this high to bring him in? A little later, and it could have caused brain damage. He has acute pneumonia. Where's the father? How could he let you carry the child through the rain alone like this?" The nurse's questions were like salt rubbed into Eleanor's wounds. Where was the father? She offered a bitter, twisted smile. "His father is busy being a hero at someone else's birthday party. My husband, he's dead." Eleanor uttered the words coldly, then scribbled her signature onto the consent form. The nurse stared at the woman's pathetic appearance, but sharp, cold eyes didn't dare to ask further questions and hurried back inside with the file. The hospital hallway was deserted, the cold wind seeping through the window, chilling Eleanor to the bone. Only now did she feel the biting cold. Her wet pajamas clung to her skin, and her scraped knee still oozed blood. But she didn't care. She sank onto a cold metal bench, her eyes fixed on the emergency room door. Time passed, each second as heavy as lead. An hour, then two. To keep herself from collapsing, Eleanor took out her phone. The screen was cracked in one corner from where it had fallen, but it still worked. She intended to text Ethan Riley, her private lawyer and close friend, to ask him to prepare some documents, but, as if by a malicious force, her fingers slid to a social media app. Right at the top of her feed, a trending post updated 15 minutes ago caught her eye. It was from Chloe Miller's secondary account, an account Chloe thought Eleanor didn't know about, but Eleanor had been aware of it for a long time. The photo was taken in a luxurious presidential suite at the Grand Plaza Hotel. In the soft, flickering candlelight, a woman's slender, pale hand held a man's large hand. On the man's wrist was a limited edition PC Philippe Grand Complications 5270. Eleanor stared at the watch, every intricate detail of its engraved dial etched into her memory. She had personally ordered it from Switzerland 3 months ago, using all her personal savings as a gift for Daniel on his promotion to CEO. When he received the gift, he had embraced her, vowing to cherish it as he cherished their love. Yet now, that very watch appeared in his mistress's boastful photo on the very night his son lay in an emergency room. The caption beneath the photo was short but provocative. "Thank you, my man. Even with the storm outside, you came to me and gave me the warmest birthday. Love you, D.H. Daniel Hayes." He hadn't just come. He had brought humiliation for his wife and son as a gift for her. Eleanor scrolled down to the comments. A few of Chloe's friends cooed. "Wow, what a watch. I heard that's worth as much as a condo. Your man spoils you." Chloe replied with a heart emoji and the words he said, "I deserve the best and the old stuff at home that gets thrown out sooner or later." The old stuff at home. Eleanor let out a soft eerie laugh that echoed through the silent hallway. So in their eyes she and Leo were just old, cumbersome items waiting to be thrown out. She had sacrificed everything for Daniel. From a silver-spooned Aries of Vance Industries, she had hidden her identity and defied her father to marry him. A man from a humble background but full of ambition. She had used her family's hidden connections to pave his way, silently handling business troubles for him and even accepted a supportive role, caring for their family so he could focus on his career. She had believed her sacrifices would earn her a happy home. But she was wrong. Her sacrifices had only fueled his greed and arrogance. He thought his success was entirely his own, and she, his humble wife, was no longer worthy of his status. A hot tear fell onto her phone screen, blurring Chloe's smug face in the profile picture. But it was the last tear. Eleanor wiped her face, her eyes shifting from pain to icy resolve. She screenshotted the post, saving it to a hidden folder. Then she opened her contacts and found a number she hadn't called in 5 years. Mr. Richard Vance, her father. Just then, the emergency room light went off. The door opened and the doctor emerged, looking tired but a little relieved. Family of Leo Hayes. Eleanor sprang up, her numb legs almost giving out. That's me. How is my son, doctor? The doctor nodded slightly. Fortunately, he was brought in just in time. The boy had acute pneumonia complicated by the high fever and seizures. We've brought the fever down and stabilized his condition. He's out of immediate danger but needs to be in the ICU for at least 24 hours for monitoring. His lungs are very weak, so we need to be extremely cautious. Eleanor let out a long shaky breath, feeling as if 8000 lb weight had been lifted from her chest. Thank you, doctor. Thank you so much. As she watched the gurney carrying Leo to the recovery room, seeing her son's small, pale face covered in medical tubes, Eleanor's heart ached. But her mind was remarkably clear. She could not let her son continue to live in this toxic environment. She could not let an irresponsible father and a manipulative mistress hurt Leo ever again. Eleanor turned and walked to a secluded corner of the hallway. She dialed her father. He answered almost immediately, his dignified voice tinged with worry. Eleanor, why are you calling so late? Has that scoundrel Hayes hurt you again? Hearing her father's warm voice, the man she had turned her back on to chase a blind love, Eleanor's nose stung. She took a deep breath, suppressing her emotions, and spoke each word clearly. Dad, I was wrong. I want to come home. There was a second of silence on the other end, then a decisive voice. Good. I've waited 5 years to hear you say that, sweetheart. Where are you? I'll send someone to pick you up right away. I'm at Metropolitan General Hospital. Leo is sick. Dad, I need the best legal team from Vance Industries, and I need you to help me prepare asset freezing procedures. I want a divorce. That's my girl. A Vance has to be decisive. I'll come myself. As for that scoundrel, I'll make him regret the day he was born. Hanging up, Eleanor leaned against the wall, her gaze fixed on the window. The rain hadn't stopped, but a faint light was beginning to break in the eastern sky. Tonight was the last night she would cry for Daniel. Tomorrow, when the sun rose, the weak Eleanor of the past would be gone. The person returning to that mansion would be Miss Vance of Vance Industries, the one who would reclaim everything, principal and interest, from those who had trampled on her love and self-respect. Eleanor returned to Leo's room, watching him sleep soundly. She kissed his forehead gently and whispered, "Sleep well, Leo. When you wake up, Mommy will give you a new world, one without storms, only warm sunshine." She asked the nurse to watch over her son for a moment, then quietly walked out of the hospital and hailed a cab. She needed to go home to clear out the remnants of the past before her dear husband returned. The faint dawn light filtered through the hospital room curtains, illuminating Eleanor's haggard face. After a sleepless night monitoring Leo's every breath, her eyes were bloodshot. Yet, strangely, there was no longer the usual sadness or weakness in her gaze. The extreme fear of the previous night had solidified into a cold, sharp block of ice embedded deep in the young mother's heart. Leo's fever had subsided, his breathing more even, though his face was still pale, and his tiny hand bore a bruised needle mark. Eleanor felt her heart turn to cold ashes. For the past 5 years, what had she lived for? For a foolish, youthful love? For a man who valued his ego more than the lives of his wife and child? A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It opened and a dignified middle-aged man with silvering hair, but eyes as sharp as an eagle entered. Behind him were 2 tall bodyguards and Ethan Riley, chief counsel of Vance Industries. It was her father, Chairman Richard Vance. Eleanor stood, her numb legs making her sway. Richard Vance quickly stepped forward to support his daughter, his eyes scanning her frail appearance, then resting on his grandson in the hospital bed, pained beyond words. Eleanor softly called, "Dad." Her voice. Richard Vance patted her shoulder gently, his voice deep yet carrying undeniable authority, said there was no need to speak. He already knew everything. The security camera footage from the mansion and the hospital had been retrieved. He affirmed that the Vance family would never let their own suffer such injustice. Ethan Riley stepped forward, placing a stack of documents on the table, his eyes filled with sympathy and determination as he looked at Eleanor. He told her that all the procedures had been prepared according to the chairman's wishes. She only needed to nod and the plan would be immediately activated. Eleanor looked at Ethan, her childhood friend who had silently supported her throughout the years. She picked up the file, glancing at the clear black and white text. Divorce papers, asset division agreement, investment freeze order. She looked at her son once more. The image of Daniel laughing happily with his mistress while their son was at death's door reappeared, vivid as a slow-motion film. Her last hesitation vanished. Eleanor turned to Ethan and said she wanted to proceed immediately. Then she turned to her father, saying she would return to the Vance estate. But first, she needed to make a trip back to the Hayes mansion. She had to reclaim what belonged to her and Leo and leave Daniel what he deserved. Richard Vance nodded in satisfaction. He said Maria and 2 bodyguards would accompany her. Leo would stay here. He had already mobilized the best medical team from abroad for consultation. No one could take the boy without his order. Eleanor bent down and kissed her son's forehead, whispering an apology, then resolutely turned and walked out of the room. Her back was straight, exuding the proud aura of a Vance heiress that she had deliberately concealed for years to be a beautiful wife. The sleek black limousine from Vance Industries brought her back to the Hayes mansion. The rain had stopped, but the house still felt damp and cold. The housekeeper had not yet returned. The vast house was eerily silent. Eleanor entered the master bedroom once the cozy home she had meticulously nurtured. Daniel's clothes were still scattered on the bed, left haphazardly before he went to his meeting. The familiar scent of his cologne now made her nauseous. She opened the closet, unhesitatingly pushing aside the dazzling evening gowns Daniel had bought for her to wear to social events, helping him maintain his image. She only took her simple clothes, Leo's favorite toys, and most importantly, the photo album chronicling their son's growth. Maria, the trusted housekeeper of the Vance family, quickly helped her pack. As she folded clothes, she secretly wiped away tears, saying, "Miss Eleanor, you've suffered enough. This time, back home, the master and madam will make it up to you." Eleanor smiled faintly, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She replied that she hadn't suffered. Every foolish mistake has a price, and this time she paid with 5 years of her youth. A bit expensive, but worth the wake-up call. In less than an hour, all personal belongings of Eleanor and Leo were neatly packed. The room felt strangely empty. Eleanor walked to the dressing table and took off her wedding ring. The diamond ring with which Daniel had once knelt and proposed, vowing eternal love, now lay starkly on the cold marble surface. She took out the signed divorce papers, her firm, decisive signature right beside the ring. Eleanor thought to herself, did Daniel think he was a phoenix rising from the ashes? No, he was just a lucky sparrow that happened to land on a branch. Today, that branch had broken. Eleanor picked up her handbag and walked out the door without a single backward glance. The mansion door slammed shut behind her, closing a tearful chapter of her life and opening a ruthless war. Leaving the Hay mansion, Eleanor sat in the gleaming black limousine. The interior of the car was quiet and luxurious, completely separated from the hustle and bustle of the city. She took out her phone and dialed a special encrypted number. This was the private banking hotline reserved for top-tier investors. The other end answered immediately, the voice of Mr. Thompson, the bank director, respectful and deferential. He said it was an honor to hear from her. Chairman Vance had briefly informed them of the situation, and they were awaiting her command. Eleanor leaned back in the leather seat, her eyes gazing at the skyscrapers gliding past the window, her voice cold and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. She requested Director Thompson activate the marital risk clause in the investment trust agreement between Everest Capital and Hayes Corporation Director. Thompson cautiously asked what level she wished to apply. Eleanor's lips curled into a smirk, each word she uttered carrying immense weight. She requested the highest level, a comprehensive freeze, blocking all corporate accounts of Hayes Corporation, Daniel Hayes's personal accounts, and all supplementary credit cards he had issued. She demanded the immediate recall of short-term preferential loans requiring early repayment due to a violation of the CEO's ethical clause. Director Thompson worriedly stated that doing so would immediately paralyze Hayes Corporation. Their cash flow was already very weak. If funding were cut off now, bankruptcy would be a matter of days. Eleanor interrupted, her voice unwavering, affirming that was precisely what she wanted. She wanted him to wake up tomorrow morning without a penny in his pocket, unable to use his cards, and with his company unable to pay salaries. She wanted him to experience the feeling of helplessness as his world crumbled before his eyes. Director Thompson replied that he understood and would implement it immediately. The system would send confirmation notices of the asset freeze to Daniel Hayes's address within 30 minutes. Eleanor hung up, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath. Many people didn't know that Hayes Corp's rapid rise over the past 5 years wasn't due to Daniel Hayes's exceptional business talent, but to the massive capital injection from Everest Capital, a private investment fund established by Eleanor herself using her mother's inheritance. She had silently pumped lifeblood into her husband's company, concealing her identity to protect his fragile male ego. But that ego had been used by him to support his mistress, to trample on her and their son, so she would reclaim everything. Her money, even if thrown into the sea, should at least make a splash, not be enjoyed by that unfaithful couple. The car stopped in front of the city's most modern office building. Ethan Riley was already waiting there. He handed her another stack of documents. These are the asset freeze confirmations from the court and the bank. The hard copies have been express delivered to the Hayes mansion, taped right onto the refrigerator door, as you requested. Eleanor took the confirmation paper bearing the red seals of the bank and the court. She recalled Daniel's habit. Whenever he came home drunk or sober, the first thing he did was open the refrigerator for a drink. This paper would be an excellent appetizer for him tomorrow morning. Eleanor continued, her eyes flashing dangerously, asking Ethan about the luxury condo Chloe Miller was living in and whose name it was under. Ethan adjusted his glasses, a knowing smile on his face. He informed her that it was in Daniel Hayes's name, but was marital property. Even though he had secretly bought it with embezzled company funds, legally, she had half ownership. Furthermore, with the evidence of infidelity she provided, the court would rule that most of the assets belonged to her and Leo. Eleanor nodded in satisfaction. She told Ethan to notify the building management to cut off the power and water and deactivate the key cards, stating that the owner requested the unit be sealed off for dispute resolution. She wanted to see how Chloe would survive on the 25th floor without electricity, water, or an elevator. Ethan looked at her with admiration, saying that she had truly changed. Eleanor looked him straight in the eye, her voice deepening. She said it wasn't a change, but that she was reclaiming what was rightfully hers. Her son almost died because of their depravity. She would not let anyone hurt him again. From now on, the weak Eleanor was dead. Only Eleanor, the Aries of Vance Industries, remained. She stepped into the elevator, her fitted black dress exuding a cold power. The financial war had officially begun. She didn't just want Daniel Hayes to divorce her. She wanted him to leave with nothing but the clothes on his back, buried in debt, so he would understand that the price of betrayal was far higher than he could ever imagine. The next morning, the blazing sun shone across the city, but it couldn't dispel the chill from last night's storm. A taxi pulled up to the gate of the Hayes mansion. Daniel Hayes stepped out, his suit wrinkled, tie loosened, and a distinct crimson lipstick mark on his white shirt collar. He stretched and yawned, his head still buzzing from the alcohol and the sweet afterglow of the passionate birthday night with Chloe. Last night was wonderful. Chloe had been compliant and doing unlike Eleanor at home, who only ever complained about Leo's illnesses and household expenses. Daniel muttered about having to go back and listen to more lectures, then fumbled for his wallet to pay the taxi. He intended to pull out his powerful black credit card for a showy payment, but reconsidered, thinking the taxi's card reader might be faulty. He instead pulled out a few dollar bills, tossed them to the driver, and turned to enter. The heavy gate creaked open, revealing a silent courtyard. Daniel frowned. Normally by this time, Eleanor would be watering flowers, or at least the sound of children playing would be heard. Why was it so quiet today? She must be tired from Leo's illness last night and still sleeping. He opened the front door with his fingerprint and stepped inside. Eleanor, he called out, his voice tinged with the imperiousness of a husband who expected to be served. No answer. The large house was steeped in an eerie silence. There was no smell of the breakfast Eleanor usually cooked. No sound of slippers shuffling to greet him. The living room was neatly arranged, so clean it felt cold, as if no one had ever lived there. Daniel knitted his brows, a sense of unease creeping into his heart. He went upstairs and pushed open the master bedroom door. He wondered where she was. Was she hiding from him? And how was Leo? The room was empty. The bed was cold and undisturbed. The closet doors stood wide open, revealing empty shelves. All of Eleanor's clothes were gone. The dressing table was bare. No lotions or lipsticks. He froze for a few seconds, then let out a scoffing laugh. He thought she was playing her old trick of running home to her parents to threaten him. He muttered. Women, always making a fuss over nothing. If you want to leave, just leave. Let's see how many days it takes before you come back crying. Daniel didn't bother with it anymore. His throat felt parched from the alcohol. He went down to the kitchen, intending to drink a glass of cold water to sober up, then go back to sleep. He opened the refrigerator. As the door swung open, a white paper smacked him in the face, neatly taped with a magnet in the most visible spot. The title clearly read, Confirmation of Asset Freeze and Debt Recall Notice. Daniel squinted, reading it. At first he smirked, thinking it was Eleanor's childish prank. But as he read the line, all accounts of Mr. Daniel Hayes have been frozen at the request of the primary creditor. The smile on his face froze. He snatched the paper off, crumpling it in his hand, asking himself, what the hell is this? He rushed to the living room to the coffee table where he usually sat. On the table, a divorce paper lay starkly beside her diamond ring. On the divorce petition, the signatory was Eleanor Vance and the reason was clearly stated. Adultery, dereliction of marital duties, abandonment of a child in critical condition. Daniel picked up the papers, his hands starting to shake, not from fear of losing his wife, but from a feeling of humiliation. His weak, stay-at-home wife, who clung to him all year, dared to initiate a divorce. Just then, his phone vibrated wildly in his pocket. It was a text message from the bank. A series of notifications flooded in. His checking account had been locked. Available balance 0. His platinum credit card had been deactivated. The loan for his Maybach was overdue, requiring immediate payment, otherwise the asset would be repossessed. A barrage of messages, like bombs exploding, sent Daniel into a real panic. He frantically dialed Eleanor's number, but only received the message. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. He threw his phone onto the sofa, roaring like a wounded beast, yelling that Eleanor dared to do this to him. He didn't believe Eleanor had the guts or the ability to do this. It must be her family egging her on. A small-time merchant's family daring to confront the CEO of Hayes Corporation. He would show them. But first, he needed money. He remembered there was some cash and gold in the safe in his study. He rushed into the study, spinning the safe dial. A click echoed and the safe opened empty. Inside, only a yellow sticky note remained with Eleanor's familiar handwriting. It read, the money used to buy this gold was from my inheritance. I'm taking it back. The safe is yours. You can keep air in it. Blood rushed to his head. Daniel staggered, grabbing the edge of the desk to steady himself. He realized the situation was far more serious than he had imagined. This empty house was not a temporary tantrum, but a calculated punishment. Unable to reach Eleanor, unable to get money, Daniel, in his extreme panic and anger, decided to drive to the company. He had to check the actual financial situation. He didn't believe a housewife like Eleanor could affect Hayes Corporation. He rushed to the garage, but then remembered both cars were gone. The Maybach. He didn't know where the driver had taken it. In fact, it had been repossessed by the bank early that morning. His wife's Porsche was nowhere to be seen. He cursed and had to run to the main road to catch a taxi. Arriving at Hayes Corp headquarters, he was met with unprecedented chaos. Employees huddled together, discussing anxiously, their faces worried. As soon as Daniel walked in, the CFO rushed out, her face pale. She informed him that this morning the bank announced the freezing of all company accounts. Material suppliers were also calling to cancel contracts. Having heard that the company was unable to pay, the stock price was plummeting. Daniel roared at her to shut up, cold sweat beading on his forehead. He asked who spread such rumors, threatening to sue them, and demanded she immediately call the bank director. The CFO trembled, replying that she had already called, but they said it was an order from Everest Capital, the company's largest shareholder. They had activated the risk clause, and asked if Daniel had offended them. Daniel froze. Everest Capital, that was the lifeblood of Hayes Corp for the past 5 years. He had never met the head of this fund. Everything had been handled through legal representatives. Why were they turning on him now? A thought suddenly flashed in his mind. Leo. Last night, Eleanor said Leo had a high fever and seizures. Could this be why she was making such a fuss, prompting her family to take action? He needed to find Eleanor immediately and make her stop this madness. Daniel tried to reassure the employees that he would resolve this. Everyone just continue working normally, he said, then turned and ran out of the company. He went to Metropolitan General Hospital. After all, he was Leo's father. He had the right to visit his son. Moreover, he believed that as soon as he appeared, with a few comforting words and the excuse of being busy with work, Eleanor would soften as always. Women were always sentimental when it came to their children. At the pediatric reception desk, Daniel, panting, asked for Leo Hayes' room. The nurse checked her computer, then looked up at him with a strange gaze. She said that Leo, the boy with a high fever and seizures from last night, had been discharged and transferred. Daniel angrily asked where he was transferred. The nurse replied that the records indicated a transfer to the Vance family wing and questioned why he, as the child's father, didn't know. Daniel was stunned when he heard Vance family wing. That was the most exclusive VIP area of the hospital, reserved only for members of the Vance family and high-ranking officials. No amount of money could get you in without a connection. Why was his son there? Could it be Eleanor's family? A chilling premonition struck him. He had never truly cared about his wife's background. He only knew her father was a businessman in another city. He had always thought it was just an old couple saving up for their daughter who married into wealth. Daniel rushed to the VIP area, but as soon as he reached the security gate, two tall bodyguards in black suits and sunglasses stopped him. They coldly stated, "Private area, no unauthorized entry." Daniel tried to push past, yelling that he was Leo Hayes' father and he was there to see his son. One of the bodyguards coldly shoved him, sending him stumbling to the ground. He said Daniel's name wasn't on the visitor list. Miss Vance explicitly instructed that you and any dogs are not allowed inside. Daniel, enraged, asked who he dared call a dog, and who Miss Vance was. Was it Eleanor? What right did she have to block him? The bodyguard looked at him with contempt, as if looking at a pile of garbage. He advised Daniel to go look in a mirror. Miss Vance is the sole heiress of Chairman Richard Vance of Vance Industries. You lived with her for 5 years and didn't know you were sitting on a gold mine. How foolish. The bodyguard's words struck Daniel like lightning. Richard Vance. Vance Industries, one of the largest financial conglomerates in the country. Eleanor was Richard Vance's daughter. Everything spun before Daniel's eyes. He remembered the times Eleanor had offered astute business advice, which he had dismissively brushed aside. The extravagant gifts his in-laws sent, which he had scorned, and Everest Capital. He collapsed to the ground, his face drained of color. He hadn't just lost his wife and son. He had just realized he had single-handedly shattered his own golden ticket. His abandonment last night had become a death sentence for his future. But his arrogant and greedy nature wouldn't allow him to accept defeat so easily. He scrambled to his feet, his eyes bloodshot. He screamed that Eleanor had deceived him, dared to hide this from him. He challenged her. "You think I'm scared just because you're a Vance heiress? My son has the Hayes name. I'll sue you for custody." He turned and stormed off, already plotting another dirty scheme, unaware that behind the soundproof glass door of the 5th floor VIP lounge, Eleanor stood watching him, a glass of red wine in her hand, her eyes as cold as ice. Observing him like a dying ant, she took a small sip of wine and whispered, "The game has just begun." Daniel Hayes, the headquarters of Vance Industries, stood towering in the heart of the city's financial district, a skyscraper reflecting the brilliant sunlight on its glass panels. This was a symbol of economic power that every entrepreneur yearned to enter. In the executive conference room on the 68th floor, a somber atmosphere prevailed. Elderly major shareholders who had fought alongside Chairman Richard Vance for decades sat in silence. Today, the chairman had announced a significant change in the CEO position. The heavy wooden door slowly opened. The crisp authoritative click of high heels on the marble floor resonated. Eleanor Vance stepped in. If Daniel Hayes were present, he would surely not recognize the woman before him. Gone was the housewife with her messy bun and cotton pajamas. Today, Eleanor wore an ivory white pantsuit, exquisitely tailored, accentuating her slender figure. Her long hair was lightly curled, falling naturally behind her. Her makeup was light but sharp, especially her eyes, which exuded a cold aloofness. She walked to the head of the table, a position usually reserved for her father, and sat down. Ethan Riley followed closely behind, placing a stack of documents in front of her. Eleanor scanned the conference room, her clear voice carrying an invisible pressure. She introduced herself as Eleanor Vance, who would be taking over as CEO of Vance Industries, authorized by the chairman. The shareholders exchanged glances, some surprised, some skeptical, but seeing Ethan's confirming nod and her chillingly calm demeanor, they all silently nodded in. "Welcome." The meeting proceeded quickly. Eleanor made decisive policy decisions, particularly in order to recall investments from high-risk projects, among which Hayes Corporation was glaringly red-circled. At the end of the meeting, Eleanor returned to the CEO's office. She stood before the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the tiny cars below. The feeling of holding power in her hands was vastly different from holding a ladle in a small kitchen. For 5 years, she had deliberately clipped her own wings to stay in a cage. Now was the time for the phoenix to be reborn. Ethan knocked and entered, a tablet in his hand. He reported that Daniel Hayes was in the reception lobby loudly demanding to meet representatives of Everest Capital and Vance Industries leadership. He claimed there was a misunderstanding and wanted to renegotiate. Eleanor turned, a mocking smile on her lips. She asked Ethan if he still didn't know her identity. Ethan shook his head, a slight scoffing laugh escaping him. He said Daniel still thought Vance Industries was a distant partner and Everest Capital, a mysterious benefactor. He could never imagine that his humble housewife held the lifeblood of his company. Eleanor walked to her desk. She told Ethan to let him wait and to tell the receptionist that the CEO was busy and could not meet unscheduled guests. In the grand lobby on the first floor, Daniel Hayes paced like a trapped animal, sweat pouring down his back. He constantly checked his watch, then looked at the executive elevator with pleading eyes. The beautiful receptionist looked at him apologetically, but maintained a professional smile, announcing that the CEO was in a meeting and invited Mr. Hayes to wait. Daniel stifled his anger, forcing a smile, saying he had an urgent matter concerning a multi-million-dollar project. He waited for 3 long hours from 10:00 a.m. to 1:00 p.m., his stomach growling. Vance Industries employees walked by looking at him with curiosity, whispering, making him feel as if thousands of needles were pricking his ego. He, Daniel Hayes, CEO of Hayes Corporation, once heralded wherever he went, was now abandoned in the lobby like a delivery person. Just as Daniel was about to give up, the VIP elevator doors opened. A group of people emerged, led by a radiant woman surrounded by assistants. Daniel squinted. That figure, that stride, looked so familiar. He was about to rush forward, but 2 large bodyguards swiftly stepped up, blocking him like steel walls. "Excuse me, CEO. It's Daniel Hayes of Hayes Corp," he shouted. The woman didn't stop, didn't even glance at him. She walked straight to the Rolls-Royce, waiting outside. Her suit jacket fluttered gently in the wind, leaving behind a cold back and a faint scent of luxurious perfume, a scent that Chloe or any woman he had ever met could never possess. Daniel stood frozen, muttering, "No way, that silhouette looked so much like Eleanor, but it couldn't be her. How could Eleanor have such regal poise? How could Eleanor be riding in a Rolls-Royce? He must be seeing things." He stumbled out of the Vance Industries building, the scorching midday sun hitting his face, making him dizzy. He didn't know that this missed encounter was just a prelude to a series of humiliations he was about to endure. Daniel Hayes' office at Hayes Corp was in chaos. Telephones rang incessantly, employees scurried about, and the printer churned out endless cancellation notices. Daniel slumped into his chair, tearing at his hair. In just 8 hours, the empire he had built over 5 years had crumbled. Accounts were frozen, partners had turned their backs, and employees were resigning en masse. The office door burst open. Chloe Miller walked in, her face beaming, a fashion magazine in her hand. She was still oblivious to the financial storm, thinking Daniel could salvage the situation. Chloe sauntered over, sat on Daniel's lap, and wrapped her arms around his neck. She cooed. "Last night was so much fun. But I saw a new Hermes bag in a magazine. It's gorgeous. Buy it for me, darling. As a belated birthday gift." Daniel, already furious, exploded. He violently shoved her away, sending her stumbling. "Are you insane?" he roared. "The company is on the verge of bankruptcy. Where would I get money for a damn bag?" Chloe froze, her big eyes filling with tears. Her innocent expression vanished, replaced by a calculating glint. She stood up, her voice suddenly cold. "The company is really bankrupt. Didn't you say you were a business genius?" Daniel angrily loosened his tie. "This time it's different. Eleanor, that crazy woman conspired with outsiders to freeze my assets. I need cash desperately." He turned to Chloe, his voice softening slightly. "Give me back the jewelry and credit cards I gave you. I need to sell them. When this crisis passes, I'll buy them back for you tenfold." Chloe's face hardened. She stepped back, crossing her arms, a mocking smile on her lips. "You're funny," she sneered. "What's given is given. That's payment for my youth spent with you. Now you want to strip the clothes off my back." Daniel couldn't believe his ears. "Was this the sweet understanding, Chloe?" He glared, pointing a finger at her face, calling her ungrateful. "You clung to me when I was rich, and now that I'm down, you turn your back." The two began a loud argument, vulgar insults flying through the poorly soundproofed office. Just as the argument reached its peak, the company's internal PA system suddenly crackled. "Hello. Do you have any idea what time it is? A fever again? I'm in a crucial meeting. Daniel, hurry over and blow out the candles." "All right, I'm coming right now, sweetheart. Happy birthday." All employees stopped what they were doing. The space was utterly silent, save for the echoing recording. It was Daniel and Eleanor's phone call. Daniel and Chloe in the office froze. His own voice, Chloe's cooing voice, his cruel abandonment of his sick child, all laid bare. Daniel's face turned purple. He lunged to turn off the speakers but couldn't. Outside, the employees' gazes were filled with utter contempt. So, the all-night meeting was him fooling around. His son was having seizures, and he was busy blowing out candles for his mistress. How can a man like this lead anyone? Chloe's face was bloodless. She knew her reputation was ruined. She grabbed her purse, covering her face, and ran out, leaving Daniel standing alone in a room filled with humiliation. Daniel slumped onto his desk. He knew this was Eleanor's gift to him. She didn't just want him to lose money. She wanted him to lose all honor, all respect. She wanted to expose his hypocrisy to the world, and she had done it cruelly and thoroughly. 3 days after Hayes Corp plunged into crisis, Daniel finally received a meeting from Eleanor's representative. The location was a luxurious garden cafe. Daniel arrived 15 minutes early, wearing his most expensive suit, trying to project confidence. He believed Eleanor would appear. All he needed was to meet her, use emotional manipulation, and leverage their child to sway her. Exactly at 3 p.m., a black car pulled up. The person who stepped out wasn't Eleanor, but Ethan Riley. The lawyer walked into the cafe, sat down opposite him without a handshake. Daniel snapped. "Where's Eleanor? I want to talk directly to my wife, not an outsider." Ethan leisurely ordered a black coffee, then looked up at Daniel. He said Eleanor didn't want to meet a man of such moral decay. "From this moment on, I am her fully authorized legal representative." Daniel slammed his hand on the table, growling, "Ethan, don't push it. Tell her to lift the asset freeze immediately or else don't blame me for being ruthless." Ethan chuckled, pulling a thick stack of documents from his briefcase. "Daniel Hayes, take a good look," Ethan said. "This is a detailed bank statement of your accounts. A total of $1.5 million has been transferred to accounts related to Chloe Miller for a condo, a car, jewelry, designer bags, and luxurious trips. Meanwhile, last month you complained about Leo's expensive tuition making Eleanor pay for it." Daniel glanced at the dense numbers, cold sweat breaking out. Ethan continued his attack. He stated that the $1.5 million was marital property. Eleanor demanded he fully return this amount before any division, otherwise he would face charges of asset dissipation and fraud. Daniel stammered, "I don't have the money to pay it back." Ethan shrugged. "That's your problem. Eleanor has a message for you. She doesn't need your cheap apologies. She wants you to leave empty-handed, just as you came to her. Even the shirt you're wearing was bought with her money. She's not asking you to strip here. That's the last bit of dignity she's preserving for you." Daniel gnashed his teeth. He shifted to a threatening tone, saying that if Eleanor pushed him, he would expose everything. "I'll let the world know that the daughter of Chairman Vance is a cruel woman who drove her husband to ruin. Let's see if Vance Industries stock plummets then." Ethan stood up, adjusting his tie, looking at Daniel with pity. He told Daniel to go ahead and try, but to remember that the Vance family had enough money and power to make him disappear. Also, Leo has formally changed his last name to Vance. You have permanently lost your parental rights. With that, Ethan turned and walked away, leaving Daniel sitting alone, surrounded by the curious stares of other patrons. He clenched his fists, his nails digging into his skin. He hated Eleanor. He hated Ethan. He hated the whole world, but he forgot that he had dug his own grave. Driven into a corner, Daniel returned to Chloe Miller's condo, where the power and water had been cut, forcing him to climb 25 flights of stairs. Chloe was huddled in a corner, her face smudged. Seeing Daniel, she only looked up with resentment. Daniel threw his suit jacket to the floor. He told Chloe that they were pushing him too far and he had to fight back. Chloe's eyes lit up. She was a calculating person and knew that if she abandoned Daniel now, she had nowhere to go. She might as well take a chance. She moved closer to Daniel, whispering her plan. She suggested that since Eleanor was using her family's power, public opinion would always side with the underdog. "Let's play the victims," she urged. "Go online with your parents. Cry that your rich daughter-in-law despises your poor family, forbids grandparents from seeing their grandson, and is having an affair with her lawyer." Daniel's eyes glowed when he heard this. A perfect plan. He immediately called his parents in his hometown asking them to come to the city that night. The next morning, a live stream was broadcast on a popular social media account. In the video, Daniel sat with his head bowed, looking haggard. Beside him was his mother, a woman from the countryside, crying hysterically. Between sobs, she lamented their misfortune, marrying a rich daughter-in-law who treated her in-laws worse than dogs. "She didn't let us know when our grandson was sick. She just took him away. My son worked day and night. And just because he forgot his wife's birthday, she threw him out, froze his assets, and now he has no money for food. She's also having an affair with that lawyer, conspiring to steal my son's company." Daniel occasionally interjected with choked words, saying he just wanted to see his son. Chloe stood behind the camera, directing the internet trolls she had hired. Thousands of comments began to flood in. "Oh my God, a rich daughter-in-law this cruel. Men work so hard and their wives cheat and steal assets. This kind of woman should be publicly shamed. Boycott Vance Industries' justice for this husband. The wave of online fury erupted. Those unaware of the full story began to direct their anger at Eleanor. Vance Industries' stock price fluctuated slightly. Daniel watched, a smug smile on his lips. He thought, Eleanor, you have money, but I have public opinion. Let's see how you weather this storm. At the Vance family mansion, Eleanor sat on the sofa, an iPad in her hand, watching the live stream. Her face was calm. Maria, standing beside her, trembled with indignation. They are shameless. Miss Eleanor, let me call someone to deal with them. Eleanor waved her hand. Let them perform, she said. The better the play, the more tragic the ending. They want to play the victims. I'll grant their wish. But first, they have to climb really high so when they fall, they shatter. She turned to Ethan, telling him to prepare a press conference. It was time to release the undeniable evidence. The truth about that stormy night and the true face of his crying mother would be brought to light. Daniel Hayes had chosen the wrong opponent for this media war. The grand ballroom of the Grand Hyatt, booked by Vance Industries for the press conference, was packed. Hundreds of reporters from major news outlets, famous bloggers, and curious onlookers were present. The story of the wealthy daughter-in-law oppressing her husband had been the hottest topic on social media for 24 hours. At exactly 9:00 a.m., the ballroom doors opened. Camera flashes flickered continuously. Eleanor Vance stepped out. Contrary to everyone's expectations, Eleanor appeared surprisingly simple. She wore a modest, long black dress devoid of any jewelry. Her makeup was light, but it couldn't hide the fatigue in her eyes. Beside her were Ethan Riley and Vance Industries' formidable legal team. Eleanor walked to the podium, bowed humbly, and sat down. Her composure silenced the ballroom. Ethan took the microphone, announcing that they were compelled to speak out due to the grave damage to Miss Vance's reputation. A reporter immediately stood up. Is it true, Miss Vance, that out of baseless jealousy, you froze your husband's assets and drove him to ruin? Eleanor looked directly into the camera. She didn't answer, but gestured to the technician. The giant LED screen behind her lit up. The first image was a magnified medical record. Patient name Leo Hayes, 4 years old. Diagnosis, acute pneumonia, high fever with seizures, respiratory failure. Admission time, 2:15 a.m. October 20th, condition upon admission. Critical. The entire ballroom gasped. Next, the screen split in half. The left side displayed security footage from the luxury apartment building where Chloe Miller lived. At 10:00 p.m. October 19th, Daniel Hayes appeared in a stylish suit holding a large bouquet of roses, his arm around a young woman's waist. Both were laughing happily. The right side of the screen displayed footage from a taxi's dash cam. At 2:00 a.m. October 20th, in the pouring rain, Eleanor Vance, alone, held her convulsing son desperately banging on the taxi window. The brutal contrast made everyone hold their breath. On one side, a husband immersed in raillery. On the other, a mother fighting to save her son's life. Eleanor took the microphone, her voice steady. She stated that she was not a saint to forgive a man who betrayed her, but she was a mother. On the night her son had a 104-degree fever, she had called Daniel Hayes 12 times and the answer was that he was busy, and forbade her from disturbing him. The screen then displayed call history and a short audio recording of that phone call. Chloe's cooing laughter and Daniel's happy birthday sweetheart echo echoed through the ballroom. Eleanor paused, then delivered the final blow. She affirmed that a father who happily cut a birthday cake for his mistress while his son was having life-threatening seizures was not worthy of being a father. She froze his assets not out of jealousy, but to reclaim what belonged to her son. Her money she had the right to give, and she also had the right to take back when the other party was no longer worthy. The silent space was broken by scattered applause, which quickly spread into resounding cheers. The live stream of the press conference achieved record viewership. Millions of social media comments immediately turned the tide. Oh my God, he's an animal. His child was at death's door and he was fooling around with his mistress. Poor Eleanor Vance. She's so strong. Boycott Daniel Hayes. Justice for Eleanor and her son. Daniel Hayes sat in his office staring at the computer screen, his hands trembling. He knew his victim act had been torn apart, exposing the ugliest truth. He had lost miserably and shamefully to the woman he once despised. After the press conference, the boycott of Daniel Hayes and Hayes Corp spread to reality with alarming speed. At Hayes Corp headquarters, a mournful atmosphere prevailed. The customer service department was paralyzed by complaints and cancellations. Daniel locked himself in his office, his hair disheveled, his cell phone rang incessantly. Creditors, the bank, former partners. He answered a call from the director of First National Bank. The voice on the other end was cold, announcing that due to the severe collapse of the CEO's credibility, the bank had classified Hayes Corp as a high-risk bad debt. They demanded Daniel repay the entire $3 million loan within 3 days. Daniel slammed the phone down. $3 million. He didn't even have $30,000. The office door was flung open, his assistant rushing in with more bad news. Hayes Corp's stock had plummeted. The SEC was demanding an explanation. Suppliers had sent trucks to block the warehouse gates. Daniel roared in despair. He still had assets, didn't he? Real estate land. In a fit of panic, Daniel remembered he owned 2 resort villas and a prime piece of land. Their current value must be in the tens of millions. If he could sell off a portion, he would have enough cash. He hastily called a real estate agent offering a price 30% below market value. The agent called back 15 minutes later. I'm sorry, the transaction cannot be completed. Upon checking the notary system, all these properties are jointly owned by Mr. Daniel Hayes and Mrs. Eleanor Vance. To sell, her signed consent is absolutely required. Daniel felt like he'd been struck by lightning. He remembered years ago when he bought these assets, Eleanor had handled the paperwork. He had just signed without noticing she had cleverly included her name as co-owner. From the very beginning, Eleanor had silently built a protective fence. Now, to get money, he had to beg Eleanor. But she would rather let those properties lay than help him. Daniel buried his head in his hands, a bitter laugh echoing. He had been stripped of every escape route by the wife he considered useless. Without a penny, his credit cards locked, his cars repossessed, Daniel was forced to take a taxi to find Chloe Miller. He recalled the jewelry, designer bags, and cash he had given her, totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars. If he could get that back, he could survive. Chloe was in the luxury condo Daniel had rented for her. When he arrived, the door was wide open. Inside, Chloe was hastily stuffing clothes into suitcases. The room was a chaotic mess. What are you doing? Where are you going? He demanded. Chloe turned, her eyes cold. She continued to fold an expensive dress. The power and water are cut off here, and reporters are constantly lurking. I can't live like this. Daniel grabbed her arm, his voice pleading. He told her to give him back the diamond jewelry set and the cash. He desperately needed money. Chloe violently yanked her arm away. She stood up, crossing her arms, looking at him with undisguised contempt. Are you dreaming? That money is for my services to you. Once a gift is given, there's no taking it back. Are you such a pathetic man that you're demanding things back from your ex-girlfriend? Daniel couldn't believe his ears. Ex-girlfriend? What do you mean? Are you leaving me? Chloe smirked. Wake up, Daniel. What do you have now? Your company is bankrupt. You're buried in debt. Your reputation is rotten. Do you think I loved you for your beer belly? I loved your money. Now you're just a penniless bum. Why should I bury my life with you? Daniel trembled with rage. He remembered her sweet words that she loved him for who he was. It was all a play. He roared, lunging to grab her handbag. He called her ungrateful. Chloe screamed obscenities, scratching his face. They struggled, falling onto a pile of clothes. In the struggle, Chloe's suitcase burst open, spilling out a passport and an airline ticket. The name of the accompanying passenger wasn't hers alone, but another man's, a real estate mogul Daniel had once met. Daniel picked up the ticket, his hands trembling. How long have you been cheating on me? Chloe adjusted her messy hair and smirked. Not long. Ever since your company started showing signs of cash flow problems. A smart person knows how to find an escape route, right? Who's stupid enough like Eleanor to sacrifice her youth and money for a worthless man? Although Eleanor was quite clever, wasn't she? She knew to kick you out just when you had nothing. The mention of Eleanor was the final stab. He compared the two women, one who gave him everything, yet he betrayed, the other who only knew how to extort money, yet he adored her. Daniel dropped his arms, staggering backward. He felt dirty. He turned and walked away, leaving behind Chloe's shrill laughter. After leaving Chloe's, Daniel wandered the streets. He went to his parents' home. His mother, seeing her son in such a pathetic state, instead of comforting him, screamed that it was all Eleanor's fault. She stole all your assets. Stole my grandson. She's so rich, she'll surely brainwash the boy to make him forget his Hayes bloodline, she urged Daniel. If she won't let you see him, just go to his school and pick him up. You're his father. Who would dare stop you? Just get the boy here and we'll have a hostage to negotiate with Eleanor. She loves that child so much. She'll surely fork over a large sum of money. In his desperation, Daniel found his mother's words logical. He thought Leo was his son. He had the right to take him anywhere. The next morning, Daniel, wearing a borrowed helmet, rode an old scooter lurking around the new international preschool Eleanor had transferred Leo to. At dismissal time, he hid behind a large tree. There, Leo was walking out with his teacher. There was no Eleanor, no bodyguards. Daniel darted forward, grabbing Leo's hand and yanking him. Leo screamed in terror. The young teacher, startled, rushed after him. "Who are you? Let go of the child. I'm calling security." Daniel tore off his mask, revealing his haggard face. "I'm his father," he roared. "What's wrong with a father picking up his son?" Leo, seeing his father, was not relieved, but cowed in fear. He screamed, struggling to escape Daniel's grip. Daniel's violent actions attracted the attention of surrounding parents. They began to gather, whispering. Many recognized him as the notorious bad father from social media. They pulled out their phones recording. "Oh my God, it's Daniel Hayes. Is he trying to kidnap his own son? Look how scared the boy is." Daniel's anger flared. He yelled at Leo to shut up and forcefully dragged the boy, making Leo stumble and scrape his knee. Just then, two sleek black Cadillacs sped up, braking sharply. Four large bodyguards leaped out, swiftly subduing Daniel, twisting his arms behind his back. Eleanor stepped out of the second car. She rushed to embrace Leo, who was sobbing hysterically, checking his wounds. Seeing his bleeding knee and terrified face, an unprecedented rage flared in Eleanor's eyes. She stood up, walking to Daniel. Without a word, she raised her hand and delivered a resounding slap across his face. The slap carried all the indignation of a mother protecting her child. Eleanor snarled, "Daniel Hayes, you have crossed my final line. You want to see your son? Fine. Next time we'll meet in court and I'll show you the price of kidnapping and disturbing the peace." Police sirens wailed in the distance. Daniel was handcuffed and shoved into the police car amidst the jeers of the gathered parents. The image of him being arrested while his son watched with extreme fear marked the end of his last shred of dignity. The plan not only failed miserably, but also pushed him toward imprisonment. The sky over the city was gray, much like Daniel Hayes's mood as he stepped through the gates of the district courthouse. He wore an old frayed suit. Beside him was a third-rate lawyer. The preliminary hearing for the divorce case between plaintiff Eleanor Vance and defendant Daniel Hayes officially began. On the other side, Eleanor sat upright, her serene and cold demeanor radiating power. She didn't glance at Daniel once. Ethan Riley sat beside her, calm and sharp. Daniel's lawyer stood up, his voice shaky, presenting his client's demands. The defendant agreed to the divorce, but requested full custody of his son, Leo Hayes, and a 50% division of the existing assets. Daniel sat there, a flicker of hope in his eyes. He thought that no matter how powerful Eleanor was, the law was the law. Assets acquired during marriage had to be divided equally. The judge turned to the plaintiff's side. Ethan Riley leisurely stood up. "Your Honor," he said, "before we discuss asset division, I would like to present a crucial piece of evidence. This is a prenuptial agreement signed between Miss Eleanor Vance and Mr. Daniel Hayes on May 15, 5 years ago, one day before their marriage registration." Upon hearing this, Daniel burst into laughter. "Ethan, are you insane? I never signed any such agreement. This must be forged." Ethan offered a faint mocking smile. He requested the judge show Daniel the original document. When Daniel held the contract, seeing his own elaborate signature at the bottom, his face palled. A hazy memory from 5 years ago resurfaced. It was the bachelor party the night before their wedding. He had been very drunk. Eleanor had given him a stack of papers saying they were urgent marriage registration documents that needed his signature. He had signed blindly. It turned out that Daniel had unknowingly signed his own financial death warrant. The contract clearly stated that all assets created or inherited by Eleanor before and during the marriage were her separate property. The shares in Hayes Corp were investment capital from Everest Capital. Daniel Hayes was merely a salaried operator. The judge slammed the gavel, declaring the contract legal and valid. Daniel utterly collapsed. Regarding child custody, Ethan presented undeniable evidence. Leo's medical records, the video of Daniel abandoning his sick son, and the police report on his attempted kidnapping. The judge delivered the final verdict. Divorce granted. Eleanor Vance was granted full custody of her son. Daniel Hayes was stripped of visitation rights and was not awarded any assets. Furthermore, he was ordered to repay the $1.55 million he had embezzled to give to Chloe Miller. The court session concluded. Eleanor stood up. As she passed Daniel, she paused, speaking softly. "That signature was the price of your blind trust. Years ago, I had you sign it only to guard against potential risks, never imagining I would use it against you. You forced me to use it." Daniel looked up, following his ex-wife's retreating figure, tears streaming down his face. He had lost completely. After the trial, Daniel Hayes officially became a pauper, drowning in debt. He still believed he had talent, just lacked capital. He frantically sought opportunities. Learning that he was desperately seeking investors, Eleanor smiled coldly. She decided to give him one last gift. A high-end business gala was held. Daniel managed to sneak in. He wore a rented suit, clutched a glass of cheap wine, and searched for potential investors. A middle-aged man with a foreign-sounding accent, David Jenkins, approached him. He introduced himself as a representative of a new venture capital fund from the States seeking promising tech projects. He claimed to have heard of Daniel and expressed great interest in his idea of an AI-integrated e-commerce ecosystem. Like a drowning man grasping at a straw, Daniel enthusiastically boasted. David Jenkins nodded, occasionally interjecting with praises. At the end of the party, David Jenkins said his fund was ready to inject $5 million. However, there was a condition. To demonstrate his commitment, Daniel had to contribute an initial $1 million to the project's joint account within 3 days. $1 million, a huge sum. But the allure of $5 million and the prospect of returning to fame blinded him. He promised unequivocally that he would secure the funds. He began to scramble everywhere. He sold his PC Philippe watch, borrowed from friends, even knelt and begged old partners, but still only managed to raise $200,000. Desperate, he remembered a business card from a loan shark. He gambled everything. He thought that in just 3 days when David Jenkins' money arrived, he would repay the loan immediately. He signed a loan agreement for $800,000 with the loan sharks. Holding $1 million, Daniel immediately transferred it to the account David Jenkins had specified. He called David Jenkins to report the news. The voice on the other end congratulated him and scheduled a contract signing for Monday morning. Daniel dreamed of returning to his CEO position while Eleanor begged his forgiveness. He didn't know that David Jenkins was just an actor hired by Ethan, and the receiving account was a bottomless trap. Monday morning, Daniel, in his best suit, arrived at the address of the investment fund's office. He asked the receptionist about David Jenkins' office on the 18th floor. She looked at him blankly, saying the 18th floor was vacant. A chill ran down spine. He hastily called David Jenkins. The number you have called is no longer in service. He rushed up to the 18th floor only to find an empty dust-covered space. He had been conned. $1 million, $800,000 of which was loan shark money. Daniel collapsed, his desperate scream echoing through the empty hallway. He staggered back to Hayes Corp, which was now mostly sealed off. But as he reached the door, he saw a group of tattooed, menacing men waiting. The loan sharks. As soon as they saw Daniel, they lunged. Punches and kicks rained down. He curled up, wailing for more time, but was met only with brutal kicks. They beat him half to death, then stripped him of his watch, ring, wallet, and even his shoes. Before leaving, the leader spat on his face, giving him 3 more days to find the money. Otherwise, they would take an arm. Daniel lay motionless. He struggled to his feet, crawling into the secret office where he had hidden some foreign currency and antiques in a wall safe. But when the secret door opened, he froze. The safe was wide open, empty. Standing before the safe was Chloe Miller. She had returned, using a spare key he had foolishly given her, sneaking in while he was away. Chloe was stuffing the last stack of dollars into her handbag. Seeing Daniel bloody and battered, she showed no fear, only a sneer. Daniel croaked, "Why did you do this to me?" Chloe stepped over him, her sharp, high heel pressing down on his outstretched hand. She said coldly, "Consider this compensation for my youth. Following you gained me nothing but infamy. Now I need some capital to start a new life." She advised him, "You should blame yourself for being stupid, trusting women too much." With that, Chloe turned and walked straight out, leaving Daniel lying in a pool of blood and betrayal. He watched her figure disappear. He had lost everything. This was the living hell Eleanor had given him. 3 days after the beating, Daniel was relentlessly hunted by the loan sharks. He had nowhere to go. His parents, hearing about his debts, had fearfully locked their doors, disowning their son. In desperation, his feet unconsciously led him back to the Vance mansion. The gates stood imposing under the misty winter rain. Daniel stood there looking no different from a beggar, his clothes ragged, his face bruised. He shivered from the cold. He remembered the stormy night, when Eleanor had also desperately carried their child out of the house. But at that time he was happily with his mistress. Now the wheel of fortune had come full circle. Daniel knelt before the iron gate, his voice, calling out Eleanor's name, calling out Leo's name. He begged to see her one last time. The mansion gate slowly opened. A luxurious black Rolls-Royce Phantom slowly rolled out. Daniel lunged forward, trying to block the car, begging Eleanor for forgiveness, pleading for her to save his life. The car stopped, the rear passenger window slowly lowering. Daniel saw Eleanor sitting inside wearing a warm cashmere coat. Beside her, Leo was sleeping soundly. Daniel sobbed, reaching out his dirty hand. "I was wrong, Eleanor. Please give me a chance. I'll be your slave. Save me. Please, they're going to kill me." Eleanor looked at him, her eyes devoid of triumph, anger, or pity. It was the gaze one gives to a stranger. That silence was more terrifying than 1,000 curses. She didn't say a word. She just turned and spoke softly to the chauffeur. "Let's go, Frank. Don't let trash dirty our view." The car window slowly rose. The luxurious car sped through a puddle, splashing dirty water onto Daniel, then zoomed away, leaving him kneeling alone in the biting cold rain. Daniel buried his head on the ground, his sobs mingling with the rain. He understood that the greatest punishment for him was not imprisonment or poverty, but having to live and witness those he loved happy with others, while he himself was forever removed from their lives like a stain that had been thoroughly washed away. In the distance, several tattooed figures slowly approached. Daniel closed his eyes, awaiting the tragic end he had written for his life. After Daniel was chased from the Vance mansion gates, another piece of news emerged. Daniel's mother, Mrs. Carol Hayes, had been admitted to a psychiatric hospital after witnessing her son being beaten. Eleanor received a call from the private investigator she had hired. He reported that he had found an encrypted electronic diary in an old laptop Chloe had left behind. In her office, Eleanor opened the file. In the diary, Chloe meticulously documented her process of approaching Daniel's family. The most chilling revelation was the relationship between Chloe and Mrs. Carol Hayes. The two had known each other online. Mrs. Carol Hayes had always harbored animosity towards Eleanor, believing she was too pampered and offered no help to her son's career. A recorded conversation Chloe saved made Eleanor's hands tremble. "Auntie, I think Eleanor is quite healthy. She'll surely have a grandson for you soon," Chloe had messaged. "Healthy, my foot," Mrs. Carol Hayes replied. "If she has a child, her position will be even more secure. You have to find a way to keep her in check." What followed was Chloe's venomous plan. She had given Mrs. Carol Hayes an unidentified herbal remedy, falsely claiming it was a tonic, but it was actually a cold-natured herb that caused hormonal imbalances, making it difficult to conceive. Mrs. Carol Hayes had secretly mixed the powder into the soups she brought to the city for her daughter-in-law. Eleanor remembered that 3 years ago, her body had suddenly weakened. Her periods were irregular, and she couldn't conceive a second child. It turned out that her own mother-in-law, along with her husband's mistress, had colluded to poison her. Their goal was to make her feel useless. Reading the last line where Chloe gloated that the plan had caused Eleanor to suffer a miscarriage once without anyone knowing. Tears streamed down Eleanor's face out of pity for the tiny life that had been snatched away by its own grandmother. Eleanor closed her laptop, her eyes becoming sharper than ever before. If before she only wanted to reclaim her money and dignity, now she wanted them to pay with blood and freedom. This was aggravated assault and attempted murder. She dialed Ethan Riley. She told Ethan to take all this evidence to the authorities. She wanted to prosecute Mrs. Carol Hayes and Chloe Miller for assault. This time, she would show no mercy. The city police department had been busy. After receiving the complaint and evidence from Vance Industries' legal team, an urgent investigation was launched. Daniel, after being refused help by Eleanor, had been hiding in a dilapidated motel. He lived like a cornered rat, but the law eventually catches up. That night, police sirens tore through the quiet motel district. The rotting motel room door was kicked open. Daniel instinctively tried to flee, but 2 detectives subdued him. The cold click of handcuffs echoed, securing the former CEO's wrists. The lead detective read out the arrest warrant for Daniel Hayes for grand theft, corporate tax evasion, and kidnapping. At the same time, at the Canadian border crossing, Chloe Miller, with dyed blonde hair, was trying to flee the country. She had used the stolen money to buy a fake passport. As she approached the control booth, her heart pounded. The customs officer scanned her passport, then looked up at her with a probing gaze. He signaled and 2 border security agents stepped forward. Chloe knew something was wrong. She dropped her luggage and turned to run, but the police had already set up an ambush. In less than 2 minutes, Chloe was tackled to the floor. When the police officer pulled out a nationwide arrest warrant for theft, fraud, and assault, Chloe fell silent. The 2 betrayers finally met at the city police department's detention center. In the interrogation room, Daniel and Chloe were chained to 2 chairs facing each other. The moment they saw each other, they immediately lunged, verbally tearing at each other. Daniel roared, calling Chloe a wicked woman that she had instigated him, stealing his money. He confessed everything, shifting all blame onto Chloe. Chloe was just as vicious. She laughed maniacally, blurting out about Mrs. Carol Hayes and her poisoning Eleanor, and also accusing Daniel of being the mastermind behind the company's tax evasion. The more fiercely they tore at each other, the clearer the evidence became. 3 months later, the trial took place. The courtroom was packed. Daniel Hayes, Chloe Miller, and Mrs. Carol Hayes stood before the bench. Daniel was emaciated, his eyes dark and lifeless. He wore the black and white striped uniform of the detention center. Chloe was disheveled. Mrs. Carol Hayes rambled, laughing maniacally. Eleanor Vance did not attend. She entrusted everything to Ethan. The judge read out the indictments. Daniel Hayes, guilty of grand theft, tax evasion, and kidnapping. Total sentence 20 years imprisonment. Chloe Miller, guilty of theft, fraud, and assault. Total sentence 12 years imprisonment. Mrs. Carol Hayes, guilty of assault. Due to diminished capacity, compulsory inpatient psychiatric treatment was ordered indefinitely. Upon hearing the verdict, Daniel collapsed. 20 years. When he got out, he would be a 50-year-old man without a home, a child, or a future. His life officially ended here. Chloe cried hysterically. Mrs. Carol Hayes still laughed maniacally, oblivious that she would spend the rest of her life in a mental institution. Before the defendants were led away, Ethan Riley approached. He held up a brand new certificate before Daniel. It was Leo's reissued birth certificate. In the section for name, the name Leo Hayes was gone, replaced by Leo Vance. And in the section for father's name, that line was left blank. Ethan told Daniel, "This is the last gift Eleanor is sending you. From now on, the boy has no legal or blood relation to the Hayes family. You no longer have parental rights." Daniel stared at the paper, his mouth agape. This pain was more terrible than the 20-year prison sentence. He had lost the last connection to the decent world. He buried his head, tears streaming down onto the cold handcuffs. He regretted it, but it was all too late. The door of the police van slammed shut, trapping him in darkness. Blackwood Penitentiary housed dangerous criminals. Daniel Hayes began his days of confinement here. On his first day, he tasted the cell rules. He was placed in a communal cell with hardened criminals. When they learned Daniel was in prison for fraud and abandoning his sick child, the cell block's leaders looked at him with contempt. In the underworld, there were unspoken codes. Never harm your wife and children. Daniel's actions were considered the most despicable. That night, Daniel was beaten within an inch of his life. From then on, his life was a living hell. He had to perform the dirtiest jobs, scrubbing toilets, washing clothes, and giving his meager portion of food to the leader. Every night, memories were his cruelest torturer. He remembered the warm mansion where Eleanor always waited. He remembered Leo's innocent smile. He remembered the days when society respected him. Daniel looked at his callous, scarred hands. These hands once wore $1 million watch and signed multi-million-dollar contracts. Now they only shoveled waste. He realized that everything he once had wasn't due to his brilliance, but given by Eleanor. She was his good fortune. He had personally shattered his golden ticket. One day, Daniel saw an old newspaper. On the culture page was a picture of a charity art exhibition. In the photo was a beautiful, radiant Eleanor standing beside a handsome Leo holding a first-place trophy. And behind them, his hand protectively on Leo's shoulder, was Ethan Riley. The three of them looked like a perfect happy family. Daniel trembled, tears blurring the image. He pressed the newspaper to his chest, letting out a pained cry. No forgiveness would happen. Daniel understood that he would pay for his foolishness with the rest of his life in torment and solitude. He had lost everything. 3 years passed. In the western suburbs of the city, there was a dilapidated bar called the Rusty Nail. This was a haunt for crude laborers and alcoholics. Chloe Miller, or Vivi as people now called her, struggled through the noisy crowd carrying a tray of beer. She wore a cheap, revealing mini dress. The thick makeup couldn't hide the deep crow's feet and her skin darkened by smoke and alcohol. In just 3 years, prison and societal rejection had transformed the once beautiful secretary into a haggard woman. After being released early, she discovered the world outside was even harsher. With a notorious record, no company would hire her. To survive, she worked as a waitress in a low-end bar, accepting being groped and teased daily. A drunk customer grabbed Chloe's arm, laughing. He stuffed a small bill into her cleavage, his rough hand fondling her. "You look so worn out, yet you're still playing hard to get. Drink with me, sweetheart, and then come with me tonight." Chloe suppressed her disgust, forcing a smile. "Sorry, boss. I only sell drinks, not myself." The man slapped her hard, sending the tray of beer clattering to the floor. He cursed. Her, still pretending to be a virgin. Everyone knows you're the vixen who stole another woman's husband. Chloe clutched her cheek, tears streaming down her face. The mocking laughter was like thousands of needles. The bar owner rushed out, not to defend her, but to scold her for breaking property, deducting her salary and kicking her out to clean up the trash. Chloe shuffled out into the dark alley. The biting night wind cut through her thin dress. She sank down beside a pile of trash bags, sobbing. She remembered living in a luxury condo, driving expensive cars. Why had her life come to this? Just then, a frail figure shuffled toward her, carrying a large sack of recyclables. He stopped by the trash can where Chloe was sitting, his blackened, trembling hands rummaging for empty cans. Chloe looked up under the faint street lamp. She froze. The man before her was skeletal, his back hunched, his face scarred and haggard, his hair more than half gray. Though broken down, Chloe still recognized those eyes. Eyes that once looked at her with passion and also with hatred. It was Daniel Hayes. He had been released early for a terminal illness. Homeless, he lived by scavenging. Daniel also recognized the heavily made-up woman crying beside the trash. He stopped, staring at Chloe. The two who had once conspired to steal another's happiness now met again in the most wretched circumstances. One, a low-end bar girl, the other a scavenger waiting to die. Daniel said nothing. He simply curled his lip into a twisted bitter smile. He bent down, picked up an empty beer can by Chloe's feet, then silently turned and walked away. He no longer cursed her. The greatest contempt was to pretend not to know someone. Chloe watched his hunched figure disappear. She suddenly laughed, a wild, maniacal laugh mixed with sobs. This was the price for being a home wrecker, for greed and cruelty. They had destroyed their own lives. In stark contrast, the city art gallery today was bathed in light. A major cultural event was underway. New Beginnings, a children's charity art exhibition. The main star was Eleanor Vance. Now 5 years old, Leo was plump and healthy, his eyes bright. Eleanor Vance stood in the center of the grand hall, greeting guests. The past 3 years had imbued her with a mature, captivating allure. She wore an emerald green evening gown, simple yet elegant. As the CEO of Vance Industries, she was now the most sought-after woman in elite circles. Leo stood proudly beside his centerpiece painting, explaining it to everyone. The painting depicted a small house by the beach with a bright sun, his mother, and a tall man holding a child's hand. Ethan Riley approached Eleanor holding 2 glasses of wine. His eyes were filled with gentle affection. For the past 3 years, he had always been by her side, helping her heal. He softly asked Eleanor if she was tired. Eleanor smiled and shook her head. She thanked Ethan. Without your help, the exhibition wouldn't have been such a success. Ethan looked towards Leo, who was now surrounded by reporters. He said Leo was a perceptive child deserving of the best. And so are you, Eleanor. Just then, Leo saw Ethan. The boy waved frantically and called out loudly, "Papa Ethan, come take a picture with Mommy and me." The clear call of Papa Ethan echoed. Eleanor blushed slightly, her eyes shining with happiness. Ethan smiled brightly, put down his wine glass, and walked toward the boy. He scooped Leo up, standing close to Eleanor. The 3 of them created a perfect family portrait. Camera flashes flickered. Tomorrow this image would appear on the front pages of newspapers, not as a scandal, but as a symbol of fulfillment. Eleanor looked at the 2 most important men in her life laughing together. In her heart, the last iceberg of the past had completely melted. She realized that the true dawn had arrived. A gentle, warm sunshine illuminating the path ahead, a path of sincere love. This winter came early. Outside the city's most luxurious French restaurant, warm yellow light spilled through the glass doors. A raggedly dressed man stood hidden behind a tree. It was Daniel Hayes. His late-stage lung disease made him cough in ragged spasms. He no longer had the strength to collect recyclables only to wander and beg. He wasn't here today to beg. He remembered it was Leo's birthday. The instinct of a father, though tainted, still urged him to come back just to see his son from afar. The restaurant door opened. Eleanor Vance stepped out first, arm in arm with Ethan Riley, laughing happily. Ethan carefully adjusted her scarf. Walking beside them was Leo. The boy wore a tiny suit, looking like a little prince. Daniel's dull eyes widened. That was his ex-wife, his son. But now they looked so distant. Leo held Ethan's hand, skipping. The boy looked up and asked Ethan something. Ethan bent down, ruffled the boy's hair, and laughed. Leo hugged Ethan's leg affectionately. That image was like a knife piercing Daniel's heart. He remembered years ago how Leo used to long for him to come home, but he was always busy. Now, that position had been filled by someone 1,000 times better. Daniel unconsciously stepped into the street. He wanted to rush forward to call his son's name. But at that moment, the headlights of a passing car shone on him, reflecting his image in the restaurant window. Daniel saw himself, a gaunt, dirty, foul-smelling man. He compared that image to the elegance of the three people across the street. He froze. What right did he have to approach to embarrass his son? Daniel retreated into the shadows, hot tears streaming down his cheeks. He clapped a hand over his mouth to stifle his sobs. He watched Ethan open the car door for Eleanor and Leo. The luxurious car rolled away, carrying with it the entire world of happiness he had once possessed and shattered. Daniel collapsed at the foot of the tree, his choked sobs mingling with the wind. He understood that the cruelest punishment was not imprisonment or poverty, but having to live and witness those he loved happy with others, while he himself was forever eradicated from their lives. Spring returned to the beautiful coastal city where Eleanor's family chose to spend their weekends. Within a private villa, a small cozy party was being prepared. Eleanor wore a pristine white maxi dress, an orchid in her hair, standing on the balcony overlooking the ocean. The sea breeze tossed her hair. She took a deep breath, feeling peace. 5 years ago, she had thought her life ended on that stormy night, but her parents' love, Leo's growth, and Ethan's unwavering presence had pulled her out of that dark mare. A warm embrace wrapped around her from behind. Ethan rested his chin on her shoulder. He softly asked her what she was thinking. Eleanor smiled. She said she was thinking about the past. Before I thought love meant sacrificing everything, but now I understand that wasn't love. It was blindness. Ethan turned her around. You're right, he said. True love is respect, companionship. When both shine together, you don't have to sacrifice anything. You just need to be yourself. Eleanor Vance, proud and radiant. I love you for who you are. He knelt on one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket. Inside was a simple yet exquisite diamond ring. I've waited for this day for a very long time, Eleanor. I promise you a peaceful home where you and Leo will never again have to endure storms. Will you marry me? Eleanor looked at the man before her. She saw her reflection in his eyes, whole and cherished. She nodded, happy tears streaming down her cheeks. Yes, she said. Ethan placed the ring on her finger, stood up, and they shared a passionate kiss under the radiant sunset. Leo ran over, cheering loudly, hugging both their legs. Mr. and Mrs. Vance stood nearby, smiling with contentment. The story of betrayal and revenge had concluded. Those who caused suffering had paid their price and faded into oblivion. No one spoke of Daniel Hayes or Chloe Miller anymore. They were just ugly dust particles swept away by the wind. Eleanor looked out at the vast, boundless sea, her heart calm. She understood that the greatest revenge against a despicable person was not to make them suffer, but to let them see her live a life infinitely happier without them. And this happiness she would hold tight. The sunset cast a rosy glow across the sky, marking the end of one day and preparing for an even more brilliant sunrise.